Thanks, Phil. I think we'll move straight on now to Dave Allport, who may not need much introduction to many of you, but Dave is the project manager for Birmingham Energy Savers. For those who don't know Dave, Birmingham Energy Savers is probably the biggest programme of retrofit in the country at the moment. I was involved early on. I first met Dave, I think, a year ago when it was $1.5 million or so size project with ambitions to maybe be 30 million. Today, I think we're kind of 100 million and counting, so it's really grown and really snowballed and gained a really high profile, and most of that down to a lot of work done by Dave. So it's a great pleasure to have him here and to hand over to you.
Thanks very much. And like all projects, actually the key element is whether or not the thinking that went into them in the early days was correct, and therefore that there are people here, very much so, who can take credit. And what I deliver is I try and manage a good vision and a good project along a line that others have set out for me. So I wouldn't take any credit for actually the success of this. I think the credit I get is to try to steer it through a course. The Birmingham Energy Savers is a programme that's going to attempt to implement the government's Green Deal, and therefore it's not quite got to that stage, because obviously the Green Deal hasn't got to that stage. So we're on a journey towards that. I think where all of today comes together is about whether or not we're trying to talk about the exception or the norm. And I think that that's at the heart of what today is about. We've seen examples in Borsall Heath of what are at the moment the exceptions. And I think we've heard from Phil about schemes that are trying to normalise certain kinds of behaviour. And I think what I would say that Birmingham Energy Savers about is trying to get volume and to normalise refurbishment. We're not going to get all of those exceptional. So I think what we're saying is that you can actually focus on getting a small number of properties to a very high standard of zero carbon, and that is incredibly valuable because what it does, it tests the technology and it shows it can be done. I think you then also have got to do a piece of work that tries to get the vast majority of people to just start moving in that direction. So I think that what we're talking about is trying to get kind of two cohorts running along, and I think that Phil's explained that very well about those early adopters and those that need to follow, because we do need everybody to follow if we're going to achieve the goals to which we're all committed. So I'm going to try and run through what we're doing. We've got a phased approach, and what our aim is contributing to the target of reducing CO2. Obviously, we're also about delivering social benefits and addressing fuel poverty. We're about addressing economic benefits and trying to get Birmingham to be a centre of a supply chain that could then begin to create jobs for people in Birmingham, as has been described. This, you'll be surprised to hear, must be at no cost to the council. Of course, you're not surprised to hear that. What council at the moment can afford put money into any kind of scheme? So everything I must do must be self-financing. What that means is that it's about, I know more now about the costs of capital and interest rates and asset-backed securities than I would ever want to know. So I'm finding out about nothing, anyway, because it's all got to be refinanced in time. We must be paid back. Birmingham Council must be paid back for any work we do in this. And what are we doing? So we just completed a pilot phase, spent $500,000. That was a photovoltaic project, and that was to prove that you could do photovoltaic onto mostly council properties. People would go for it, the supply chain could deliver it, and to find out what the price was. New World Solar delivered the photovoltaics. As I said, the whole thinking behind this is largely to do with the gentleman who is sitting over there, and there's other people in this room who have contributed to that. So a pilot phase that just said, okay, we think we can do this, we think we can earn some feed-in tariff, we think we can get the price down. Matthew will remember being at meetings and saying that he thought that photovoltaic would come down to 6,000,
4,800.
4,800 eventually, and everybody's going, no, it's 10,000, you'll never make it, it'll never stack up, it won't work. We did the project, it stacked up, it works. So we've done a PV project, and that has given the council the confidence to go forward and say, we will now do a £13.5 million phase 2 project to put photovoltaic onto 2,000 properties. That is actually more about behaviour change and fuel poverty than it is about environmental improvements. If you're going to invest 13.5 million, you could argue you could invest it in other ways and achieve more carbon savings. But as I think you'll see in a moment, we think it is having a significant change to people's attitudes, and it's also having a significant impact on those in fuel poverty, and it's helping get the supply chain moving, and it's beginning to get some interest in this whole area. We've then got the opportunity to do a European bid, which is to do a small project, 348 houses, but to test various technologies, and to technologies that perhaps at the moment don't pay themselves back. So we get 50% funding from Europe, so we'll put them into some of our properties. For example, I was interested to hear that there's a micro CHP boiler that's more suitable for a small house. The ones that are available at the moment in the UK only generate electricity if you use really quite a lot of water, and you have to have quite a large household, as I understand it. There's one that's going to be field trialled in Germany, I was told, in the next few months. And I said, okay, how many houses would I need to find in Birmingham that wanted that for you to field trial here rather than in Germany? Can I get you to bring that field trial here so that our installers, our companies, our people can see the value of that for a smaller property? Because that's more interesting to Birmingham, which has a lot of smaller households and smaller houses. The households are large, the houses are small. Okay. So that's a project to do some innovation. And then phase 3 is the one that Matthew's talking about, just come from Cabinet Member for Finance, who has agreed that we can go forward with a proposal that's going to go to Cabinet in a couple of weeks' time that will set up a procurement process for us to deliver a £100 million programme to refurbish 15,000 houses under the government's Green Deal. I'll explain how we're going to do that. And that will have the option to extend to 400 million as part of a 1.3 billion pound eventual programme to refurbish 200,000 houses. So that's the kind of scale that we're looking to operate at. But phase 1, the thing that's important to me about phase 1 was the people. So here is Marcia, if anybody knows Northfield Neighbourhood Office. If you drive on the kind of Northfield bypass bit, you're going out there, you'll turn to your right, you'll see Alwyn Drive, 4 semi-detached houses which have got photovoltaic on the roof. Marcia lives in the end one, 3 of them council tenants and 1 vulnerable owner-occupier, somebody who is both disabled and cares for a disabled person. And key for us was that people had to be at home during the day to be part of our pilot, because we're not interested in generating electricity and it going out. We were interested in the benefits of generating electricity on your roof and using it. And you'll get the chance to read the stories here, the Marcia or Emma or various people saying how they began to change their behaviour because they had photovoltaic on the roof, and because they suddenly, electricity was not something that was delivered from out there, it was my electricity. Emma, not Marcia, Emma was being interviewed by somebody from Radio 4 who said, it's a bit ugly. She said, I love my panels. You know, these panels generate electricity for her. She does all her washing when the sun's shining. If it's the cloudy day, she then leaves the tumble dryer till the next day or whatever it is. You know, she's changed her lifestyle to fit with the generating of electricity. And her children are excited about it, they talk about it at school, and so on. Okay, phase 2, very similar, about 2,000 properties, including some industrial properties. As I say, you'll get this slide. Phase 3 is just saying, okay, where is the innovation? We know what the things are, but where can we innovate? What do we need to do to actually help Birmingham typical houses, Victorian self-built houses in Aston. How do we get those to the standard? How do you get the houses in Balsall Heath? And we've got some examples here, and what we want to do is we want to say, right, we want to do 50 of each measure. So if we find a technology that works, that we think is innovative and exciting, let's do 50 of them in different households with people who won't change their behaviour and people who will, with people who are not very impressed about the disruption and people who are prepared to put up with it. Let's do it with 50 and see what happens. If it's a minor measure like a heating control system, let's do it in 100 households. Then let's do some proper monitoring. So just looking at the different technologies and seeing what will deliver the government's golden rule. And then we get into phase 3, which is this idea of a whole house solution, whereby we will both do the insulation work and put photovoltaic or some form of renewable energy into the property on behalf of the household. They get the low cost energy bill, they get the reduced cost energy because of the micro generation, and we get the payback through the Green Deal and the feed-in tariff. How does that, what's that going to do in time? We've said in Birmingham we need to get to 200,000 houses by 2026 to meet our 60% reduction target. This will produce 15,000 houses at a cost of 100 million. So we've got quite a journey to go on if we're going to get to the end of this. So it's quite a challenge. Right, so I'm going to just talk through. Sorry, I'm going to speed up a bit. Okay, here's the basic model. We're going to procure a delivery partner who will oversee the marketing, the surveying, the installing and the maintaining that delivers improvements to that house. The householder signs a Green Deal agreement with us. They derive the benefits, and then the Green Deal legislation, I'm sure you all know this, means that the charge, they agree to a charge being put on their meter. And it doesn't matter if they move, it doesn't matter if they change their energy supply company, that charge stays on their meter for the period of time, 25 years, or whatever the period you agree with them. And that charge is collected by the energy company and pays us back. So the borrowing that we take out, the 100 million we will borrow, or the 75 million, I'll explain that in a minute. The money we borrow to do the works gets paid back to us over 25 years, and, as I have to say to the Cabinet member, of course, all our interest as well. So that Birmingham does not lose from supporting this project. Because Birmingham is using the money of every person who lives in Birmingham, and therefore we're not in a position to spend money that we haven't got. So everything must be repaid. That's how we're planning to do the Pathfinder phase. We're thinking that we'll put in all the 75 million and we'll get 25 million from what's called the energy company obligation. It's like CESP and CERT and all that sort of things. Government can bring that in. So we'll put in 75 million to do the 15,000 houses. Hopefully the energy companies will put in 25 million. We've got 2 layers of debt. One's more at risk because you're obviously, as you start up the company, you're at risk. But every time you do a household and sign them up, the risk goes down. So basically we've got 2 kinds of risk, and therefore we have to, as I say, I understand now about different costs of capital depending on the rates of risk and all that sort of thing. But of course it's much lower rates of capital than most companies can get to. Then we'll move into an extension phase, and then we expect the banks to step in and then to take the major amount, because there's a limit to how much we can borrow or how much we want to borrow, because obviously you've got to be careful. So at that stage, Birmingham Energy Savers will go out to the market and bring the banks in, and the process will continue. I'll try and speed up. The idea is that gradually what you do is that you build up a kind of a large bond of people, of money that you've borrowed and money coming back in, and then you can go to a pension fund or a trust fund and say, okay, will you turn this into security? At the moment they're quite resistant, but we're looking for how we can do that. Okay, what we're doing, we're looking for a partner, we're expecting them to do all the hard work for us. They'll arrange the finance, they will do all the installing, they will do all the work. I'm not going to slow down on that, I'm afraid. The procurement process will be competitive dialogue, because this is all new and we don't know what we're actually procuring. We're procuring somebody to perhaps do it. So you have to kind of go through a process where you keep on going into dialogue with them. And we think it's going to take us 12 months to actually find the right company, the right company that's got the right solution for us. That is actually that we can then say, right, now we can give you the job. Because you've answered all the questions, like how are you going to make sure that our money isn't at risk? How are you going to make sure that the customer service is excellent? How are you going to make sure that you use local companies to deliver this, rather than just bringing people from all over Europe? How are we going to make sure that the benefits really come through to Birmingham? How are we going to make sure that the person at the end of it is actually not missold something? They're told, oh, this is really good technology, and then they find it doesn't work in their house because their house and their household is particular. So we're looking at the whole supply chain, not just installing. It's also about all the different elements, like the person who does the customer engagement and so on. We're trying to break out every tier, so there's the fabric improvement. You have to say, well, what do all the different bits that go into insulation? How do how does that actually get into your front door? And so I think I've reached the end, and now any questions? Sorry, it's a bit flick.